Welcome to episode 5. If Mr. Punch can actually be defined as a good guy, then the faces in these opening credits alternate between bad guy and good guy. Alan Seymour's adaptation and dramatisation credits also include The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe, Prince Caspian, The Voyage of the Dawn Treader and The Silver Chair. Also 3 excellent episodes of Tales of the Unexpected. Jonathan Stevens also appeared in an episode of Rennie's December Rose in 1986. So if you add Jonathan to Bill Wallace, Jeffrey Larder, Flora Page, costume designer Christine Rawlins, makeup designer Heather Squire, production assistant Marion Foles, properties buyer Barbara Horn, include Rennie Rye, Paul Stone and Tony in there, and you have quite the Box of Delights reunion. Jonathan's other appearances include Miss Marple, Great Expectations and Casualty. Puppeteer John Styles recalls staying at the Swan in Stourbridge. We don't see Judy in the Box of Delights, but along with Mr. Punch and the policeman, they all appear in the Series 4, Episode 2 of Midsummer Murders. And that episode is called The Destroying Angel. John was contracted to attend Thursday the 2nd of February and Friday the 3rd in 1984, filming the scenes at Westwood House on the Friday. He then returned on the 15th of February to shoot the Christmas party scene the following day at Kinlet Hall. On his memories of Patrick Troughton, he came across as very affable and genuinely interested in the history of the Punch and Judy show, the age of my puppets, and how I became involved in the tradition. He posed for a photograph with myself and the puppets. In the show at Seekins, Patrick Troughton voiced the devil, whilst John manipulated the puppets and voiced Mr. Punch. In the later scene at Kinlet Hall with Punch and the policeman, both are voiced by John Styles, and summarising his experiences on the Box of Delights. In the fullness of time, the Box of Delights has proved to be one of the most prestigious and rewarding assignments of my career. In another later episode of Midsummer Murders, Series 7, Episode 7 in 2004, called The Ghost of Christmas Past, that episode was directed by Rennie Rye and they brought John on board as magic advisor. So they were working together again 30 years on from Box of Delights. Robert Stevens had a sole appearance as Sherlock Holmes in 1970. The film was called The Private Life of Sherlock Holmes, and Christopher Lee played his brother Mycroft. Going by the menacing look on Abner's face when he closes the door, it gives the feeling that this is the moment he's finally had enough of Joe, and it's going to be the cell for him. One last effort from Kay here to try and convince him. The inspector has come in wafting a piece of paper and you can just make out that they're fingerprints, clearly freshly taken as he's trying to dry them. So someone else has recently been up to no good in the town of Condicut. In 1965, James Grout was nominated for a prestigious Tony Award for his performance in Half a Sixpence. The ceremony was held in New York, and it must have been a dream come true for him, sitting amongst the other nominees such as Sammy Davis Jr., Martin Sheen, and our very own Barbara Windsor.
I like the way he's pretending not to eat the sweet.
Yeah, it's got the humbug in his mouth when he's talking to his boss.
Jimmy was one of those people who's always doing what actors call business, isn't
Yes, yes.
Some would
Always.
call it stealing the scene.
Same thing. Or upstaging the others.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And of course, Bob Stevens did the same.
Oh, yes.
The quaint building you can see across the road was the old grammar school, built in 1861. Present day, it's a community hall. The building Kay comes out of is a Grade 2 listed building, although it was never a police station. The shaking of his head in disbelief that those people are actually policemen is another example of Devin's excellent performance. If there had been a Best Young Actor award at the BAFTAs, he would certainly have been nominated that year. The pop-up book Susan is looking at is showing a section of the Bayeux Tapestry, a very famous 11th century embroidered cloth over 200 feet long, and it depicts the Norman conquest of England in 1066. It features 58 scenes, including the Battle of Hastings. You can also see in her book above the battle is Halley's Comet, which was also visible in 1066. When Kay begins to head into the past, he passes through a very similar scene to Susan's book. You see the arrow in King Harold's eye, and he passes by the comet. Originally airing on Wednesday the 21st of November 1984 at 5 p.m. after John Craven's news round. Then every Wednesday for episodes 2 to 5. Then the finale was on Christmas Eve, a Monday at 5:35 p.m. It had a repeat showing 2 years later in 1986. This time they aired 2 episodes back to back, starting on Monday the 22nd of December at 5 p.m, same time on the 23rd, and on Christmas Eve the final 2 episodes aired at 4:20 p.m. A very quick repeat of this followed on BBC Two starting the following week on the 31st of December at 9:45 a.m, then into New Year's Day in 87 at 9:55 a.m, and the 2nd of January at 10 past 10 in the morning. 2 regular titles are used for the first 2 double sets of episodes, When the Walls Are Running and The Spider in the Web, but the final 2 episodes are given the listed name of Fire and Flood, rather than either Beware of Yesterday or Leave Us Not Little Nor Yet Dark. It then took 11 years to get its next showing on the new digital channel BBC Choice on Friday, Christmas Day 1998, all 6 episodes back to back from 10:05 a.m. And then 4 years later, in 2002, the CBBC Children's Channel launched, and on Monday the 23rd of December, all 6 episodes were shown back to back on there, starting at 9 a.m. Interesting hair?
Well, wild hair is exactly what you don't want for a green screen.
No, because it will
you
tear.
can see there's a sort of a halo around his head.
Yeah. Yeah, that's one of the worst things you can have with green screen.
If they had instead Brylcreemed his hair down, it would have been beautiful. Although the Brylcreem might have been tricky because it would then shine.
Yeah, it would shine. Because the Reverend Boldale certainly did.
Glyn Baker looking very well here, seeing as he'd recently been blown up on the Death Star in Return of the Jedi. Kay will shortly be arriving in Troy, and it's in these scenes where we see the appearance of Julian Sands, who played a Greek soldier. Here, it's a case of what might have been. There was more to the Troy scene than just what you see in the final edit, as Angus Kennedy, who also played a Greek soldier, recalls.
We'd certainly filmed a Troy scene with Kay arriving in the city and having to hide while us Greek soldiers led a bunch of slave captains through. There definitely was a scene that was filmed with Danny Dyson, who played the lady with the ring, who gives him a clue to finding Arnold of Todi. I'm not sure why it didn't appear in the final edit, why it wasn't used, but it could have been timing issues. I did ask the editor recently, who was at the 40th anniversary launch, and he said that there was a swapping round of scenes between episodes 5 and 6, but I can't say I really understood the reasoning. Chris Chapman did send me some production photos of us standing about on the Troy set during the filming of those bits, and I think it was the very first thing we shot when we arrived at Television Centre, but we were on call for 2 days, so that was right at the beginning of the first day, and we didn't get round to shooting the beach scene till the end of the second day. So Julian decided to use a northern accent, so he's the one who says, "What skulking Trojan is this?" And I had a West Country accent, which is when I say, "Captain, there's another of them, and he's got no shadow." And Bruce White played the well-spoken captain. I did have a little extra bit of dialogue which was edited, was after Julian says, "One whack with this sword will make the shadow fall out of him," and I had to say originally, no, that's death, it's certain death to cut a man with no shadow, let's hang him up by his heels." But I think they obviously felt perhaps that was a bit dark, so in the edit you'll hear I go, "No, let's hang him up by his heels till the shadow falls out of him." I was carrying the net. I elected to carry a net thinking I looked like a butch gladiator, and I had to go and practice slinging it over Kay when we caught him, so I had to go off and practice that, and the first time we did it we had a bit of trouble because the net didn't land properly and got caught in those clothes. We couldn't get him out of it to get him into the boat. So I think the take you see is actually the second take where the net spread out neatly and we were able to whisk him out of it and stuff him in the boat and send him off. And also if you watch the clip, it's my foot that actually accidentally gets stuck into the animated sea, which actually wasn't there obviously when we shot it. So they had to put in an audible splash you can just hear on the soundtrack to cover the fact that my foot goes into the special effect, basically.
You see the water reflecting onto the coracle.
Yeah.
They generally do that with a paddling pool that they put a broken mirror in
Yeah,
the bottom
I was
of,
about to say
and then
that.
put water on.
Yeah, and then
basically
rock
splashing
it.
about with a big light shining
Yeah.
on it to reflect that doubled light.
Yeah, done that many times. And it really works well.
So we had 2 days, I remember, sitting around in our costumes at TV Centre Studio 1, waiting to shoot our second bit, which was the beach scene. And because all of the green screen was new, it was new technology, it took forever them to do it. But all of the stuff on the toy boat on the water was shot in the studio. The scene where Patrick Troughton gets on the donkey and rides into the picture, the waterfall picture, which expands. All of that was shot at the time, so they just clustered all of the special effects stuff together, which is why it took so long.
I don't know whether they did this in this scene, but if there are scenes with sun timers like that, the props department used to have to find 2 or 3 identical ones, so that you can have one that's already empty for when you turn it over. Otherwise, it takes forever
to wait. Yeah.
I went for a walking holiday in Italy and found the village of Todi.
Really?
It's a very tiny hillside village, lovely place.
Huh.
Walked from there to Assisi.
Wow. Oh, wow.
And he's cooking bananas, early evidence of his insanity.
I'd never noticed bananas before. All right.
So we were sitting about really just bored out of our chairs. I remember Julian spent quite a lot of time sticking a sword in my foot because he was so bored. And we were sitting around chatting because none of us knew, and he didn't say, Julian, that he'd just come back from Thailand having been doing the feature film The Killing Fields. And it wasn't until months later I went to the cinema with with my wife, and suddenly, oh my God, there's Julian Sands, and he had a big part in Killingfields. But he was a hell of a nice chap. The three of us actually got on quite well, but we, as you can imagine, we were sitting bored out of our skulls for quite a long time until finally, when we came to shoot the beach scene, it was right at the end of the second day, and I was in a play in the West End. I had to get off back to the theatre, and I think it was like 6:30, approaching 7 o'clock, and we did 2 quick takes of it, and then that was it, and we disappeared into the into the into the ether. But I mean, I have to say, I'm supremely proud of being in Box of Delights. I think it's a great series. And I've had loads of people in the intervening years, even actors I've worked with, who've come up to me and said, "Oh, you were in Box of Lights. That's my favourite thing." And we always watch it at Christmas. And I do think, in a way, it's a shame that BBC has missed the trick, that they could have made Box of Lights into regular Christmas viewing on BBC, a bit like the Americans had It's a Wonderful Life. But there's a whole new generation, hopefully, who will discover it now, 40 years after it was originally made. But, it is something I'm glad I was part of.
Arnold, played by Philip Locke, most likely best known for playing Mr. Banyard in the Porridge movie. Some good effects here with the lightning. Doesn't come across as very friendly, does he?
No, quite frightening. But then children love that.
It's quite harsh treatment, very Emperor Palpatine.
That was quite a challenge for visual effects to do with the technology they had.
When Kay departs here in the book, Arnold comes back with him but vanishes for a while, and then he's there at the church at the very end.
In 1984, video cassette recorders hadn't really reached mass adoption. So
Yeah.
if you wanted to watch Box of Delights, you watched it at tea time on whichever night it was.
Yeah.
You don't get that these days because people watch it on catch up or
they schedule it whenever they want it.
So you don't get that thing. The following morning,
on the
kids
train.
will go to school
Yeah.
and they talk about the program.
Yeah.
That happens much less now.
Even when it was first released on VHS, they were quite hard to come by. If you were lucky, you'd see one in John Menzies occasionally. My friend Michael Potts managed to obtain a copy, and I think I borrowed that for many months on end. And I recall vividly going into HMV Oxford Street in the mid-90s and coming across the newly released single version with a Family Classics logo at the top, and it went straight into the basket. Back then, there was very little advertising for forthcoming video releases. It was always a great surprise when you saw it on the shelves. The Waterfall Boy, played by Jason Kemp,
who I saw the other week.
Aside from this, Jason's other most noted work was in the ITV children's science fiction series, The Tomorrow People.
That worked so well.
It did. It worked very well.
The combination of the special effects, costume, makeup, and the performance.
Yeah, it worked very well.
Just couldn't be improved.
Yeah, it was very good.
I think it's good that throughout this era of constant remakes, Box of Delights rarely gets a mention. You'd get enhanced effects with all the new CGI, but that aside, I think the nice problem with Box is it's completely etched in people's hearts and it's irreplaceable. They're soon to be on to the third effort for the line, The Witch of the Wardrobe. If you don't bring anything different to a new adaptation, you're then in danger of diluting something that was very special to many.
I've got to agree, very rarely is a remake better. Occasionally they are.
In reality, the winner of the 1935 Grand National was Reynoldstown. It achieved the rarity of winning the race 2 years in a row, winning again in 1936.
It was pretty pressurised. We were against the clock, definitely.
Did someone design a very large hem for Devin to step into?
It's blue. It's a piece of blue for him to go up and down.
And here we are, Adner's Dungeons, St Catherine's Docks. And this particular section doesn't exist anymore, is that correct?
All this was bulldozed, and this is the base of a very upmarket block of flats.
St Catherine's Dock was quite a derelict area not so long ago.
Yeah.
And it was on the up and up when we filmed in here 40 years ago, but now it's very chic.
Oh, very. Yes, we were there a little while ago. It's on the north side of the dock, which is all brand new. This area here was about to be totally demolished, and we used it. And we also had 4 fire engines up above, built cofferdams, so we could flood, pumping water straight out of the dock and then into the foundations.
There's always a certain amount of conflict between special effects and sound, because everything they do makes noises and everything we do wants silence.
Yeah.
And so we have to sort of compromise. I fight battles to get them to be quiet when there's dialogue, and I let them get away with making horrible noises when we've got ways of getting around it.
Yeah.
And in the case of the pumps, the pumps they like using are made by Coventry Climax, which is a company that makes racing car engines, and they're as noisy as anything. But my word, they shift some water.
Yeah.
So we had to sort of compromise getting them to move them further away outside of the building with long hose pipes, but whatever. But there are times when you just have to have them in the tunnels, and what you don't imagine, you're in a tunnel with a racing car engine screaming at full power.
Yeah.
This section of his dungeons is studio.
And these are his jewels, aren't they? Yeah.
There are some unsung heroes in the outside broadcast world. They're officially called rigger drivers. They drive the trucks to site, and in those days they would wear a neat black suit and tie while long-distance driving, because they were the visible representatives of the BBC. Once on site, they changed to boiler suits or weatherproof clothing or whatever is appropriate for rigging the cables and doing all the heavy lifting. Not only that, if a camera has to be tracked on a little trolley, the riggers act as grips, wheeling the camera according to the cameraman's directions. Obviously they are highly qualified HGV drivers, but they are extremely experienced drivers, and it's their mission to get the vehicles to site whatever the circumstances. The weather people had been warning of potential road closures around the border, so the rigger supervisor left London early to make as much headway as possible before the weather turned too bad. He was smart enough to make sure that they got the vehicles past Scotch Corner while the weather allowed. Once they have to close that road, it's game over until the road reopens. I think it was late in the evening when we heard that the scanner, the main technical vehicle, had arrived along with the camera van. We now had the essential equipment on site and were starting to get heavy snow falling too, so there was an enormous sense of relief. Despair turned to optimism and anticipation. Being that far north at that time of year, it doesn't start getting light until 9 o'clock, and the sun starts going down maybe about 4. Therefore it's essential to get ready while the sun is coming up so that we can shoot as soon as conditions allow. We all had our alarms set for nice and early. After breakfast we headed out, and by then became aware of the magical scene all around us. Knee-deep, pristine snow everywhere. Rennie Rye couldn't dare to hope for snow half as good as this. It was totally perfect. Spirits were high. What a way to start the series. The sky was completely clear and everywhere was calm. The actors' voices carried much further than you might normally expect. It was an enchanting place. One issue which had to be resolved in Scotland was that the catering van was still stuck at Scotch Corner. As we were filming in the grounds of the hotel, they were happy to feed the cast and crew. The hot lunch they served was excellent and very welcome, but they are not accustomed to serving 30 or 40 meals at the drop of a hat, and the lunch break took a big chunk out of the daylight hours. We would not get much filming done if we only had a few hours of daylight and spent 90 minutes of it going to and from the hotel and sitting in their restaurant during the best part of the daylight. I don't ever recall working on a show where the crew had made such an offer, but it was put to the production team that until the film caterers turned up, we should work continuously throughout the daylight with hot soup and rolls to keep us going, and only break for a proper meal at the hotel once it's too dark to film daylight sequences. Wednesday was originally scheduled for working 9 till 6 p.m, but we shot well into the night, finishing at midnight. We then had a lie-in on the Thursday morning and resumed filming at 2, continuing through to 1 a.m. Most of the night scenes with deep snow were filmed during those 2 evenings. I think it was probably Wednesday, but maybe Thursday when the caterers turned up. Film caterers are skilled at feeding lots of people rapidly or even suddenly. They initially get told that lunch break is scheduled for 1, and at any time, an assistant floor manager might tell them to have lunch ready in 10 minutes, at 12:30, or alternatively that, well, we're getting a bit behind and we won't be able to break till nearer 2. Either way, the caterers take it in their stride and make sure that it's ready when needed or kept hot until people are ready. Another thing we do is to provide hot drinks and snacks for tea breaks, biscuits in the morning, selection of sandwiches and cakes in the afternoon. Having arrived on a day when we were filming into the night, the meals were served correspondingly later than usual, and the selection of sandwiches was prepared in daylight, covered with cling film and left on a table outside the catering van until they needed to bring them up to the location. Who needs a fridge when it's cold outside? The clear skies meant that when darkness fell, it became bitterly cold. It was marginally better for those who were active, as you keep warmer if you are moving about, but the people who had to stand around waiting for others to do their job were really suffering in the cold. During the mid-evening, it was decided to serve the sandwiches and cakes. The sandwiches were of almost every imaginable variety, but banana sandwiches were often a popular option. The weather was so cold that the sliced bananas in the sandwiches froze solid and you couldn't actually bite into them. It was lovely finally meeting some of the actors. Most of the snow scenes were action scenes without much dialogue, therefore it was too early to form much of an impression about most of the actors, but there was a really good vibe from the outset. Jeffrey Larder and Jonathan Stevens had already become inseparable and would continue as a double act throughout the series.
That is a cliffhanger, isn't it?
Yeah, oh, big time.
I was expecting it to be a cliffhanger when you saw the box outside of the
Yeah,
scene, but
yeah, I thought that.
Thank you for listening.